Thought for the day. It's important to take responsibility for our own happiness and not expect people or other things to make us happy. Otherwise, we'll end up disappointed.
Welcome to 7 Minutes for Yourself. I'm Christina, and I'm so glad you've joined me for what I believe will be 7 of the most enriching minutes of your day. Let's take this time to reconnect with ourselves and improve our well-being.
In today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself, we're discussing how we create our own suffering and how we can take responsibility and action to improve our lives. Have a listen.
I recently read this story about Rose at rewireme.com. She got a call from a friend who said, "I need to talk to you about something," but she wouldn't tell Rose what it was about. So they made a plan to meet over coffee, but because of their schedules, they had to wait 2 weeks. So for 2 whole weeks, Rose worried about it. She wondered what her friend needed to talk to her about. She racked her brain. She wondered if she had offended her friend or if her daughter had done something to her friend's daughter. And Rose said, "As time passed, all I thought about was what I might have done wrong. I played back every encounter we'd had over the past month to the point where I became so distraught with the idea of what I might have done that I was driving myself a little crazy. Rehearsing explanations for my phantom behavior was causing me such great distress that I finally called a mutual friend to see if I could find out what I had done. My friend assured me it had nothing to do with me, but I didn't believe her. When the coffee date finally arrived, my friend seemed nervous. She had a hard time getting the words out and apologized, saying this was very hard for her. She eventually blurted out, "I'm getting a divorce." This was the moment that Rose's whole perspective shifted. She'd been assuming that this conversation was about her, but in that moment, all of her self-created fear, her worries, her sense of guilt, all of that fell away. And she shifted to pure compassion. She felt sadness with her friend. Now, Rose didn't know it, but she was experiencing 2 types of pain here. The pain of her friend's divorce, and before that, her own self-inflicted pain, which was brought on by her anxious thinking. So let's take a look at these 2 different categories of pain that Rosa was experiencing and talk about their differences. I know pain is complex, but for our purposes, I'm going to place pain into 2 categories, and for lack of a better word, I'm going to call them clean pain and dirty pain. So clean pain is the beautiful and innate emotions that come from our experiences, from being alive. And these emotions can include joy and gratitude, wonder, hurt, grief, regret, sadness, etc. So think about this, like, why do we listen to sad songs or watch movies that make us cry or even scary movies that make us jump? We like to feel alive and to live with feeling. In Rose's story, when she felt sympathy with her friend, she hurt with her, but this is a clean, pure sadness that comes from compassion, and it's part of being connected to people. On the other hand, dirty pain is the suffering that we create in our lives by our thoughts, our choices, and our actions. Often this pain is created by how we think and how we act. We feel bitter about missed opportunities, or we feel angry about perceived slights. In Rose's story, she created huge amounts of stress and pain when she spent 2 weeks assuming that this chat over coffee was about something she did wrong. Like Rose, we tend to spend so much of our time making ourselves suffer. And in this video, as well as throughout the rest of this course, you're going to learn about a bunch of ways that you may be creating your own suffering, of things that you're doing that are keeping you sick or hurting or angry. And this includes things like how we think about the world, blaming others, taking offense, holding grudges, taking things personally, right? Distorted thinking patterns, things like, oh, everything is awful, or everyone's out to get me, or taking things personally. Shaming ourselves for having emotions and trying to suppress our feelings, having a victim mindset, self-deception, avoiding our problems, comparison and competition with others, making bad choices, being reactive, or making choices that go against our values. And there's chronic stress, which is believing you're in danger when you're actually safe. And there's so many more, but there's a bunch of things that we do to create our own suffering. So, does this idea that you're potentially causing a lot of your own pain, whether knowingly or unknowingly, does that make you feel empowered or discouraged? Now, this is really important to check your response. For many people with depression or anxiety, they create their own helplessness in one of two ways. They say, "Oh, this isn't fair. It's my genes. Why is everything out to get me? It's not my fault." Or, on the other hand, they say, "Oh, everything is my fault. I'm a terrible person." Or maybe you do both of these things. Check yourself. When you learn what you're doing that makes it worse, you can then learn how to stop it. To be clear, I am not saying that it's your fault that you experience depression or anxiety, but I am saying there's something you can do about it. And we all have a natural impulse to blind ourselves to our self-created suffering. We try to escape our responsibility for it. And sometimes that looks like wallowing in self-vindication. We want to believe that it's not our fault, that there's nothing we can do about it other than just, feel bitter. These are two mental blocks that stop people from healing. It's blaming others or outside circumstances, or blaming ourselves. We can't create change in our lives when we blame outside forces for everything. This is like saying, "It's not my fault I'm depressed, it's my parents' fault," or "I can't help it," or "the world is such a terrible place and everyone is so horrible. They make me depressed." And we also can't create change when we blame ourselves for everything. So saying things like, "Everything is my fault, I'm a terrible person," thinking this way is just beating yourself up. When you label yourself as broken, you block yourself from taking the small actions that actually lead toward healing your pain. Neither of these attitudes, which are, believing that we're completely helpless or believing that it's all our fault, neither of these really help us take action. The reality is that we do contribute to our own suffering. Our actions, our thoughts, and our responses can greatly enlarge our pain. Blaming ourselves or others doesn't help us take any action to improve our situation.
That concludes today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself. Please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Today and every day with your kiddo is a gift. Enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in.